Welcome to Both Sides, a podcast between a film industry insider and an outsider to get their unique perspectives on movies. I'm your host, Andrew Heilman. Today, my guest is my friend Michael, and we'll be watching Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Stay tuned till the end to hear our final reviews of the film. In case you need a refresher or you've never seen it, here's the story in a nutshell. A young farm boy named Luke Skywalker joins forces with a rogue smuggler and a wise Jedi to rescue the princess and destroy the Galactic Empire's planet-killing battle station, the Death Star. Now, let's talk about this movie.
Damn, 5 must go pretty rough. 5 is like, our heroes win in 3 or 4. 5 must be the one where they get absolutely knocked.
Well, that's why it's called Empire Strikes Back. I mean,
yeah. Well, I don't know what the names are. That was A New Hope?
That was A New Hope, yeah. And that's what makes Empire Strikes Back so, awesome and significant, is that it's...
Are we recording right now? Just saying.
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Yeah. So Empire Strikes Back is so significant because it's I'm pretty sure it's one of the first, at least movie stories to be like the bad guy wins pretty much and absolutely demolishes the hero. Obviously in a movie, the traditional thing is you have the first movie and then the hero wins at the end, and then the second movie the hero wins at the end, and it just goes on like that forever. And The Empire Strikes Back took a very big narrative leap by showing the true might of the Empire by allowing them to win at the end of Empire. So it's kind of like this more dramatic, more artistic kind of movie, and that's why everyone kind of loves it a lot more. It's definitely the fan favorite of the entire franchise is Empire Strikes Back, and that's one of the reasons, because it's so innovative and stuff. Not to mention having arguably the best plot twist of any movie or any story of all time, which is obviously the Luke, I am your father plot twist.
Right.
But anyway, what did you think of this movie?
Well, I want to start with the order we're watching them in, because we're starting with 4, going to 5, 1, 2, 3, and then 6. I was skeptical of this movie, or this order at first, because I didn't know how well it would work. Because I thought going into this movie, you would need to have had watched, the previous one.
Right.
I am very happy to say that I don't think you do. The story, it feels like it starts here. This felt like the beginning.
Yeah, that was a big thing George Lucas wanted, and you'll see him talk about it in interviews and stuff. Is he goes, his philosophy is he doesn't like starting a story at the very beginning. He thinks it's very cliche or whatever, to follow the life story of someone starting at their birth or something. He likes to cut right in on the action of what's actually going on in the story. And that's what's so cool about this specific entry, is that I think one of the reasons it took so many people off guard and rose so much tension to it is because it's so deep. There's so much lore. There's so many creatures. There's so many planets. There's so many characters that, and none of them get established hardly ever. And it's like Minecraft or whatever. It's the ultimate playground for your imagination to try to figure out where did that guy come from and what's that character's backstory, versus the prequels or some of the other Star Wars movies. They like to explain a whole lot about all this sort of thing, even to your point of talking about midichlorians, how that's kind of a kind of stupid idea, taking the coolness of the mysteriousness of the Force and making it more more
Scientific.
real and scientific by adding midichlorians.
Yeah, I really don't like that, and that's going to that conversation we had earlier about during the movie about being able to decide to yourself your own interpretation. I think personally, whereas that has been canonized to the real true canon of Star Wars, I think personally that was just their way of explaining it. That one character. I personally don't think that the midichlorian thing was, at least to the movies itself, maybe for like argumentative versus battles and blah blah blah. Yeah, sure. Then you can say that. But like in the movies themselves, it gives you enough justice to where you can just say that was that one character's way of explaining it, because otherwise it's just such a letdown. That's my version of like you saying that you don't like the idea of anyone being stronger than Darth Vader. That one's my version. I can't fucking stand the idea of midichlorians. Why would you ever introduce that? That's like in terms of magnum opuses of mistakes, that's George Lucas's magnum opus of mistakes. Why would you introduce? That's like the biggest L that you could possibly do.
Yeah, it's and for further context, we were just describing about how, the difference in how people handle certain media. Some people really like everything to be nailed exactly how it is and told exactly how a story goes, and some people like to have a little bit more mystery in the story they ingest so that they could come up with their own opinion of events and stuff. And one of my perspectives, and it goes to like, does your perspective of it mean more than Disney's perspective of it, or whatever the canon that Disney or Lucasfilm or whatever comes up with? Is your own personal headcanon more valuable to you? Like in my personal headcanon, I think that the whole story hinges on Darth Vader being the most powerful being ever, the one to bring balance to the Force and everything, and that, if somehow Emperor Palpatine is stronger than Darth Vader, and that he can come back to life in a fleshly form and do all that kind of stuff, it puts less of an emphasis on the actual power of the universe that Darth Vader has in his hands. But I understand that Disney or Lucasfilm or even George Lucas himself will have everyone is going to have a different canon of how these characters work. And obviously the assumption is that the person that created the character gets to decide the actual truth of the matter. But I feel like that's a disservice to storytelling. I feel like true great storytelling is leaving some room for interpretation so that the audience is the one that gets to help come up with the story. That's why I think something like Five Nights at Freddy's is so interesting, is because even the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's himself steps back from the franchise and just lets the fans come up with all of the lore and the story and everything. To me, that's my favorite way of storytelling, even though, and people, and I'm seeing now, this is why I kind of like want to rewatch them all over again, because this movie has so many little plants that I forgot about. Like, there's a specific line that Darth Vader talks to Grand Moff Tarkin or whatever his name is. Forget what it is exactly, but the commander of the entire Death Star, basically, and they're talking about Obi-Wan, and Darth Vader's like, "Oh, I feel a presence in the Force, my old master, whatever." And Tarkin's like, "Obi-Wan, shouldn't he be dead by now?" And then Darth Vader's like, "Don't underestimate the power of the Force." So literally anyone who complains about Palpatine coming back to life and thinking that's a stupid idea, rewatch the first movie. They literally establish in that line of dialogue that the Force is so mysterious and so powerful that even people can come back to life. And you brought it up earlier. That's the whole point about Revenge of the Sith and Anakin's turn to evil, is that he's searching for this ability to bring people back from the dead and keep them alive, because he gets traumatized from losing his mother to his own inability to save her using the Force and whatever and protect her, that he can't go through that again with Padme. So he decides to go into the dark side of the Force, because the Jedi like to gatekeep everything and they're super governmental about who gets to do what, that he decides to go explore the dark side and try to get people to come back to life. So even though I personally don't like that Emperor Palpatine comes back to life and is like the big bad of The Rise of Skywalker and that whole thing, it's not like it doesn't make sense. And that's the main, thing that I guess matters, is that can it make sense? Versus some things in the newer trilogy don't really make sense. But to go on this movie is a great movie. I mean, it still holds up. Obviously, we're reviewing the 1996 version, the remastering, not the theatrical release version, which I will.
Dinner.
Okay, thank you. I'm okay for right now. The theatrical version obviously is very beloved by a lot of people. I'll always go on and say I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. I never have been. I love Star Wars. I think it's great, but it's not like my favorite movie trilogy of all time. I've always preferred George Lucas's other work, Indiana Jones, and all of the other stuff he does. But I love George Lucas. I love what he's done for the film industry. I love the history of him. And it's always good to go back and see, like, were the decisions that he made warranted in the 1996 remasterings. And a lot of, stands of the theatrical release will say, oh, George Lucas made a horrible mistake remastering all these movies. And I don't really agree with that perspective. I see it as they're his movies. He was always disappointed with the first three because the technology was not up to speed with what he wanted to accomplish. So him going back and remastering everything with CGI and everything I don't think it's that big of a deal. In fact, I think it's more on the same vein of like a true director's cut or whatever. And no one's going to knock on Peter Jackson for having a hour longer version of The Fellowship of the Ring just because he wanted it to be that way, because it's a true director's cut. So I don't think anyone can really... I mean, but that goes back to what we were saying about having our own headcanon. Like, does George Lucas's headcanon of trump someone's headcanon of watching the original theatrical release version, and should they subject to whatever George Lucas wants to change? I don't know. That's up to what people want to believe.
Yeah, I think the only time where the true quote-unquote canon matters is if you're basically having a versus debate where you're taking a character from one field to another and having them like face off. Like, that would be the only time where their canonicity, quote unquote, would matter, because you're trying to figure out who would be the stronger in that battle. Outside of that one specific debate-oriented conversation where only like truly looking at what can be the most factual interpretation of it, everything else, like you said, is much more open-ended and open for interpretation. It's what I really like about the movie. I like the movie a lot more than I thought I would. I remember I had seen the Star Wars movies in the past. I did not really like them, so I was excited to rewatch this because I wanted to see how they are, because obviously everyone loves Star Wars. And at least for where we started, A New Hope is really good. I thought it visually checked out. The only thing I thought that looked bad, even for its time, potentially, I guess, were the lasers. Like,
Yeah.
not like both the gun lasers and the lightsabers, they did not look very good. And that's, they're stuck with that kind of technology. And that's like why you said that George Lucas was happy with what they had. Well, I can see why he wouldn't be happy with what they had. That was some pretty rough looking.
Yeah, and they definitely changed the way that they did that, because I know originally what they would do is that you would have the holster. You would be, Luke Skywalker or whatever, during a take, you would be waving around, and then they told you to freeze. You'd freeze, and then they'd give you a different holster with a rod attached to it, and that rod had like some sort of spinny contraption that spun some sort of mirror or blade or whatever that would reflect a bunch of light, and then they'd go back in post, and then they'd fix it up or whatever. Versus in the prequels, what they do is that they give you a holster, and then they'll cut to someone else, and then they'll give you a different holster that has a rod on it, but it's a green rod. It's like a green screen rod, so that they could always like go in and post and attach a certain special effect, because that was before they had major green screen innovations and CGI innovations with it. So, I mean, for sure, that's like the most... And the thing that I'll say about this movie is that it's a great movie, but it really is primitive. Like, for what they were trying to do, They made so many little errors and mistakes. Even like we were talking about, in my opinion, the worst thing about this movie is the audio quality. Like there, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many of the things that were established in this movie kind of got pushed around by the fans at the time, is because you literally can't hear half the things they're saying. And I don't know if that's chalked up to scheduling issues that they, I mean, it was what? It was George Lucas's third movie he had ever directed, and he was like 30, so he probably didn't have the best ethos of experience to make sure that every take was perfect to a Stanley Kubrick level precision. But to me, George Lucas has never been that kind of director. He's always been an imaginary kind of innovator person. He's never been a perfect, we're going to do this for 150 takes until you get it right kind of director. So, I'll sacrifice bad, hard to understand shotgun microphone quality if I get, excellent music quality, excellent innovation in sound effects, and, set design and creature design, and, undertones of Nazism being represented as the Empire and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's structurally, the movie is much more deep and interesting than like you said, like a lot of people give it credit for, especially if they haven't seen it. A lot of people that aren't Star Wars fans just kind of see this franchise as kind of like dumb popcorn movies, just blind, mindless entertainment. But they have so much more depth to them.
And that's what I really realized, is because I used to be like that. I used to be like, these movies aren't like that good. They're old, like Star Wars. Like, people liked them at the time because that's what they had access to at the time. Like, these are going to be ancient pieces of art. I mean, I'm looking at the Mona Lisa. Good. It's not that great. But
You are cutting out a bit. If you could like have your mic closer or something.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, that was weird. I don't know why that was happening. But I don't know. I liked that, threw me off of my train of thought.
You're talking about Mona Lisa and how you thought that the Star Wars movies were going to be ancient pieces of whatever.
Yeah. Like ancient pieces of art. Everyone always talks about the Mona Lisa and Starry Night as being like these like wonderful, most greatest pieces of art ever made, and I'm just looking at it and I'm, in my eyes, which is just a layman, casual eye, I mean, these are not great pieces of art. Like, I mean, I don't look at the Mona Lisa and go, wow, that's the greatest piece of art I've ever seen. And that's kind of like what I was expecting go into, like, watching these movies with. But I was very, like I said, the only thing I would complain about would be the sound quality of the recording itself. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
The sound design and all that was fine, but the recording, the raw recording itself, real rough. And then the lasers. But besides that, I mean, it held up really nice. I like the backdrops, the designs, like you said, the world building of this movie, for the pacing of it, which actually was pretty damn good. I didn't feel like it was a long movie, which I remembered them feeling like they were long movies. Was really good.
That's what I mean by these movies being like very innovative in how they're edited and the pacing. And pacing is entirely determined by editing, because you'll have certain shots. So basically how it works is that you have a scene, and a scene says so-and-so is sitting with so-and-so at a restaurant. So what do? Obviously, you have to capture that scene. So you get a camera, you place it down, and you have that in all the line of dialogue of so-and-so talking to so-and-so. Well, what are you going to do there? You can't have a static shot for 5 minutes of two people talking. It doesn't look interesting. So what you do is you get what's called coverage. You put the same camera, you capture the full scene as one shot, then you get the same camera, you put it in a different position, maybe make it a little tighter so that it's a close-up instead of a wide shot, and you make it a close-up of one character, and now you have coverage. And the cool thing about that is that you could have a 5-minute long scene, and it'll be, 5 minutes in every camera angle. 5 minutes from the left, 5 minutes from the right, 5 minutes from the shot of the two of them. But in editing, this is how you fix pacing. Because if the director at any point says, I think that this conversation could be shortened, I think it's a little too long, you can't cut out giant gaps of a conversation if you have one camera angle because it looks choppy, it looks weird, it looks like it's obviously a mistake. So what you do is you get coverage from the two different angles and you turn a 5-minute scene into a 2.5-minute scene by cutting out certain lines of dialogue that don't really need to be there. That's pacing. Pacing is the sequence between one plot element to the next one, and you can shorten it with editing. And that's what I think that this movie is so perfect. It does so perfect with editing, and that's why it won the Academy Award for Best Editing. I think it's George Lucas's wife, Marcia Lucas, or ex-wife. I think she just passed away like 2 or 3 months ago. She edited this movie, and she 100% deserves that Academy Award because the movie goes through so many different phases and so many different story beats, but it never feels like it drags. It never feels like it's too fast. It always feels like everything is exactly intentional, that it balances fast-paced action with meaningful dialogue really, really well. And it is a great movie. And this is like what I think of when I think of like, I'm a patriot, so I like American things. And this is like American cinema to me. This is Hollywood, like post-Hollywood kind of rebellion filmmaker, American at its most finest.
I agree. I think that this is mixed with this and Indiana Jones because we're going on to like a Harrison Ford.
Yes,
movie
we did
binge
watch
right
Blade
now.
Runner the other day.
Yep, that too. For one, making me really appreciate Harrison Ford as an actor in general, but also I think like I'm losing my words right now, but the movie was very good. Oh, George Lucas, because he did Indiana Jones.
Yes.
As a producer or a director, I'm starting to really appreciate his work. So, like you said, I see the innovation that you talk of. Maybe he's not a fucking, Quentin Tarantino, fucking Stanley Kubrick. Like, everything has to be perfect. The viscerality of Quentin Tarantino movies, you know what I mean? But you can feel the innovation of George Lucas. There might be some rough edges here and there, but you can feel the heart.
He's always on the cutting edge. And that is the thing about George Lucas. He's not a good director. He's not a good director, and he's self-admittedly not like a great director because he himself said that he casts people that he basically doesn't have to direct. Like he has an imagination of a character in his mind, and then he's great at casting because he picks a perfect person for the role that he doesn't even have to say, oh, you know what, I think that line of dialogue was a little quirky, you should say it this way, or oh, I think you should have a little bit more energy in your voice when you say this line. Like he's not that kind of director. He likes to just give a person an opportunity that he thinks meets that character and then, does it. Like Harrison Ford is a perfect casting because as Han Solo, he is that kind of like rebellious, kind of like man's man kind of person in real life. And same thing with Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill's kind of more, he's kind of like more feminine. He's kind of like less, he's more boyish. He's kind of like more flamboyant, and that makes him a great Luke Skywalker. He's that kind of director. As seen in the prequels. I mean, the dialogue and writing and directing of the performances in the first two prequels is almost abhorrent. Like, it's just, they're either too whiny or they say things in really weird ways that doesn't make sense. Like, there's that famous line of dialogue where Natalie Portman says, suddenly I'm afraid. And she says it in the most, like, brain dead way that it's like, you have no emotion behind that word, and that's because George Lucas didn't step aside and say, "Hey, you can have a little bit more unction, or you can have a little bit more of whatever." And that's why Empire Strikes Back is so good, and why everyone loves Empire Strikes Back so much. Is if you compare the performances between this movie, and we'll see it, and maybe if you have time, we'll watch it tonight. But in Empire Strikes Back, the emotion behind their words, the performances, the nuance of their facial expressions is so much greater in Empire Strikes Back because it's actually directed by a different person with a little bit more experience. And it's such a better made movie than even A New Hope is. A New Hope is on the cutting edge of technology. It's a great movie. It holds up really, really well. But from a filmmaking perspective of raw quality when it comes to, the ancient art of directing and acting and script writing and dialogue, that stuff is way better portrayed in Empire Strikes Back. So I look forward to us watching those movies. But do you have any final thoughts before we get into the rankings to put this movie to bed?
No, I think I got basically everything out. I feel like that awkward dialogue was sometimes in this movie too, especially with Luke. But like, I don't know. I feel like awkward dialogue in a movie based on a civilization and people who would have lived completely different, like, I don't know. Star Wars would be the movie where you could have awkward dialogue and it would work. Like Lord of the Rings wouldn't be, in my opinion. But Star Wars for some reason just feels like that is okay.
They're kids' movies.
I don't know
basically.
why. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but like, yeah.
They're
But
not
that's
made
all I can
for
really say.
kids, but they have a different energy than something like a Godfather or something. It's not supposed to
Right,
be like
exactly.
super realistic whatever. If someone wants to say something a little clunky, it's not that big of a deal. But if we are to judge and review something, then we have to have some standard of excellence, which is that, how well does it portray reality? If I'm actually terrified to death and I say suddenly I'm afraid, I'm not going to have a blank expression with no emotion on my face. And that's the whole thing with
Yeah.
acting, is that good acting isn't acting. Good acting is you are that character, and there's no semblance in anyone's mind that you're just a random Joe trying to remember their lines. That's the whole thing about acting. And just because someone gives a performance that's a little weird, it doesn't mean they're a bad actor. It just means that they need to be given more time to establish themselves in that character via a director's choice to give them another take. That's the thing about acting and directing, is that a performance really is a mutual relationship between a director and an actor. It's not just, it doesn't all fall on the director and it doesn't all fall on the actor. But
Yeah.
okay, so right now this movie has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, a critic score, and a 96% Rotten Tomatoes on an audience score. What would you, given all we've talked about today, in your personal opinion, give this movie on a scale of 1 to 100?
They said it was 96 on the.
96 audience, 93 critics,
Damn,
which is way
really
closer
high.
than I thought.
Are we going to, like, do we give credit to older movies for dealing with what they had to have, or do we take them as they are?
That's
Is
a
there- or
great
do you-
point. I would take it as it is for this example.
Okay, so if you take it for what it is, and we're not granting it for them,
Because we're not
like,
we're not watching the original theatrical cut. We're watching the one where they had
a remaster.
we're watching one where they had a decade to kind of figure things out and remaster it. So, as this one is like the most updated, latest, highest quality version of this movie.
I would give this more like an 88. I think there's going to be other Star Wars movies that are going to be in like the 70s. And I think there's going to be other Star Wars that are going to be in the 90s. But this one was really good and solid. But like, there were problems in this movie that I had noticed them many times. The sound recording is so, since we're not giving it benefit of the doubt, it's like age. The sound recording was so rough. There was a couple moments where the dialogue was a little. The lasers were real rough. Like, so, as an experience, it was still really good. but acknowledging those issues that did bring me out and made me recognize in my head several different times in the movie. Also dealing with just like the fact that since it was so long ago, when you're talking about them being in spaceships, those scenes were real, like, immersion breaking too, because like, you could so obviously see that they're like sitting in like a robot that's like moving back and forth, But
Yeah, well, it's
so
also
yeah,
the oldest one with the remasterings. Like, obviously, Return of the Jedi with the remasterings is going to be of higher quality because this is the first Star Wars movie with the lowest budget and the lowest time to make it and all that kind of stuff. So no matter what, it's going to be a disjointed experience, mixture of new and old technology and new shots and old shots, and it's not the most fluid piece of media ever versus like Revenge of the Sith I think will hold up for forever because of how consistent it all is and in terms of how it's made.
and there was also a lot of setup and lore building, which I know you like more, so I expect your ranking to probably be in the 90s, maybe. But for me, I could have dealt with a little bit more action, like I'm sure we'll get from Empire Strikes Back and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think 88 is a really good place for the things that hold it back. Otherwise, very enjoyable. I mean, an 88 is higher than some Rocky movies I gave, and
Right.
I really enjoyed the Rocky movie. So this is still a A+ movie. Liked it a lot, but 93 and 96, very shocking to me. I don't think that this is that great of a movie. Maybe I'm giving it a little bit of shit, but I'm really excited to hear what you think.
History 100%. Like, this movie has had way more of like, this movie's probably been the biggest jump in cinema in history. Like, imagine seeing this movie opening night 1977. Like, it would have been like an absolutely jaw-breaking crazy experience. That being said, we don't live in 1977, and this
Yeah.
movie versus all of the other movies that came after it have definitely tarnished the way that this movie's held up. I'm still inclined to give it like a 90% because of how important this movie really is and, how much it really sets up for the entire rest of the franchise. I mean, it establishes this sort of like religious kind of, cultish whatever following that the Jedi, have. And then it also establishes the government. And then it establishes, all of the creatures and then these planets and everything. I mean, it is a marvel of human imagination that this movie exists and that someone was able to come up with it. And, it's not perfect. It really isn't. But it gives me that suspension of disbelief that, is oh so precious from any storytelling anything, to where it'll let me turn a blind, it'll let me turn a blind's eye to a lot of the mistakes in this movie, even though I'm a filmmaker and I'm supposed to like care about the mistakes and everything. But I mean, even watching this is like the 100th time I watched it. I've watched it a million times growing up. It still gives me that, childlike glee and immersion into the story, just because it's so significant and it's so different and it's so deep. But, it's not a perfect movie. I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, it's like closer to like a 70%. But I mean, it's like from a history and movie making perspective of how important and influential it is and how it kind of sets the groundwork for everything to come, I can't give it any lower than a 90%.
I expect, like I said, I did expect you to be in the 90s.
It's only 2% higher than you, okay? I agree with pretty
I
much
know.
your entire perspective on it.
I know you wanted to put it in the 90s because you have a much deeper affinity for all the things that made this movie fantastic, and that's the difference between a casual and the film student. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just feel like because I'm a casual and this was a more lore heavy introduction to it, I feel like I'm gonna thrive more in the Empire Strikes Back and also a couple of the prequel movies. Like, I really like the clones. I really like Obi-Wan, young Obi-Wan. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to place them. Trying to give some birth, because I feel like personally for me, the 96 to 93 is going to be the next one we watch with Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
That's how
It's
I feel.
objectively a better movie.
Yeah. But I also I wouldn't complain about your pick. I'm just trying to leave space both up and down because I know that there's going to be a variant.
Yes.
And I felt like this was a really good movie to set the tone for that variant. So 88 felt real right for me.
And, you know, if we're going to review all of them at one point, but like people really, for anyone who hates the prequels, the lightsaber fights alone are so much better in the prequels. Like, you know, obviously you have the battle between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Darth Maul, which is amazing, the Duel of the Fates. And then you have even like the minor ones with Anakin and Palpatine, and then obviously you have Anakin and Obi-Wan, and all just the choreography is so masterful in those prequels. Like, I have to show you the clip after this, but it's a deleted scene from the prequels that Hayden Christensen does as Anakin Skywalker from Revenge of the Sith, where it's a deleted scene where he does this jaw-dropping move where he's fighting with a villain. He's fighting Count Dooku in a sword fight with his lightsaber, and he spins it around, and then Count Dooku he does a big swipe, like a giant circle swipe right in front of him as Anakin's arms are out, like he's about to cut off Anakin's arms. But Anakin drops his lightsaber mid that spin, pulls his hand back, and then picks up his lightsaber after the spin is completed and then goes back into the fight. Like, that is... I don't care what you think about the prequels. That is a masterful little fighting move. And, you know, there's so many of those moments in the prequels. But anyway, you say 88, I say 90%. Thanks for watching. We'll watch Empire Strikes Back soon, and then we'll review it and everything. I always enjoy these little conversations.
Thank you for listening to Both Sides. What movie do you want us to review next? Let me know and I'll credit you in your username. Like and follow if you enjoyed this podcast, and to stay notified of future reviews. Remember, your right to your opinion matters. Peace out.